Your game collection should have as many games as you want. And it should be made of the games you want it to be made of. Hello and welcome to Assorted Meeples. I'm Phillip, the Meeple on duty, and today we are talking about board game collection again because I'm kind of stuck on that subject right now as I painfully try and keep my collection where I want it to be. Some people have some really strong opinions about this, and I get that, and so understand that everything I'm saying is my opinion and your collection is what your collection is. So, take everything I have with a grain of salt. Another thing, I have no hard, fast rules for you in this department. I am just going off of my observations and my understandings. Some of this is coming from, I'm on the Board Game Geek Facebook group, and you'll see people who take shelfies that, like me, as you can see in the background, like, we have a rather large, and a lot of people's are well bigger than mine, and there's also a few people that, or people that share, that are just getting into the hobby that have, like, one shelf with, like, 10 games. And they're like, just starting out. And I'm like, well, honestly, that's a good collection. You don't need more games. But, you know, everybody has the limit of games that they're willing to have. So, this video is more for, actually it's for anybody. If you've been in this collection or in the hobby space for a board game space for a while, and you're starting to get overrun or starting to be curious about what a collection should look like. If you're starting out and you are dipping your toes in the water and finding out that you really like board games in this hobby space, but don't really know where to go or what's going on, this video is kind of for you guys. So, again, your collection should have as many games as you want and be made of the games that you want it to be. So let's break that down a bit. Also, another big thing to remember when you're going through and listening to this is your board game collection is going to be in a constant state of flux. You'll be getting games, you'll be taking games out, you will be having space constraints and things like that that you're going to run into. So, how many games should you have? What size is the right collection? There's no hard answers to this one. My first question that I'm going to ask about, how big your collection should be is this your primary hobby? Because if it is, that means you're going to devote those dollars and you're going to devote the time and the space. If this is not your primary hobby, I would suggest keeping a smaller, tighter board game collection that you rotate quite a bit to keep fresh games in, as well as the perennial favorites. Sorry, flipping my notes. Another huge question is your significant other, if you have one, a board gamer as well, and is willing to give up the space for the collection? Now, my wife, she plays games with me. I love her, but she is not as big of a board gamer as I am. She loves to play. She just doesn't go nuts about it. And she's also very kind in giving, if I wanted more space, she would willingly, grudgingly, for my hobby and for my collection, because she sees it as a collection. And I'm just not willing to do that. I have put a hard, fast limit on myself. I get this shelf, and then we have one shelf in our bedroom that has the games of our 10 by 10 challenge on it. So every year or 10 by 5 this year, every year I'm going to have to rotate games that are up there and down here and really work what games how many games I have in there. Another thing, how much space can you realistically give to storing and maintaining your collection? Because I probably could find more space in our house, but would it take over? Like, before I got this shelving unit behind me, I had games in, like, I want to say 2 or 3 places, and sometimes just stacked up where I couldn't get to them very well or get around them very well. And that's not what I want. Is it starting to feel your space starting to feel claustrophobic? Even if you have a dedicated room or dedicated space, is that space starting to feel very tight and claustrophobic where you don't necessarily feel like you have room to even move and play the games that you want to? The other part of this conversation comes down to, at least to me, is I'm viewing my games as a collection, not as these are my board games. This is my collection of board games. Have you guys curated, which means selectively chosen, which games are there that are on your shelves? Because if you haven't gone through and done this, and all you're doing is just grabbing games, you're just hoarding. That's probably going to upset a lot of people. I'm sorry. But if you just, like, every year thousands of games get published, if you're grabbing them all up, one, getting them played is going to be next to impossible unless you play an insane number of games. And two, you're not going to play old games that are your favorites. And if they're just taking up space, my question is why do you need them? So, how do you curate versus hoard? Well, first, look at what kinds of games you actually play. If you are a solo gamer, do you have a bunch of party games? Are you just like me and have, your significant other you play the most games with? Do you have a bunch of 2-player games? These are questions you need to ask. How many people do you typically play with? What games do you guys like? All those are questions that you're going to need to ask along with that space. So if you have one bookshelf to fit everything on and you are a primary solo board gamer and you have a bunch of multiplayer games and only like 2 or 3 solo games, that looks like a problem to me. That means your collection is sitting on the shelf most of the time. And that's not the objective of this game. Collecting is another game besides playing actual board games, but that's another side tangent altogether. How would I structure my collection? This is, just so you know, this is a little loose. And mind you, I feel like that I have too many board games right now. I am actively looking to try and cull my games while bringing in new games. I am failing at it, but I am trying. So 50% of my collection, I would like to be what I would call daily playing games. These are games that can and will be pulled off the shelf at the drop of a hat. Like, hey, do you want to play this game? Yes. Okay, we get out on the table and we play it. We know the rules. We are fluent in the game. And it doesn't take much to get it on the table. The next portion, I would say, is about 25%. I'd call outlier games. These are games that you love and your group loves to play, but it takes a certain kind of mood or mental capacity, or it's just a deviation from that normal 50% of the games that you guys typically play. You like it, but it's not an everyday game or an every time game. That's what I would say. And then I would say 10 to 15% I would call experiment games. These are games you either looked at and bought on a whim, not knowing if you'd like it or not, or they're not in your normal wheelhouse. They are games like, I'll say, Twilight Imperium. Most people are not playing that every time they get together. But if it's a game you guys like, it should be in your collection so it's available to play when you guys are in the mood for it. Another 10 to 15%, I would say, are Grail games. Now, I define Grail games a little differently than some people. To me, a Grail game is a game that you had to go out, purposely sought out, and purchased, regardless of the cost, to have in your collection. This is a game that you love and you know is never going to leave your collection because it has that much value to you. Now, I don't necessarily look at these games as being extremely rare games. I don't look at them as being extremely old games. But this is a game that you have sought out, added to your collection, at a cost most likely greater than its value, and it will sit in your collection even if you never play that game again. So I'm running with that definition. Again, these are my thoughts and opinions. Please comment down below with your thoughts and opinions on what a board game collection should look like, whether it's how big it should be, how small it should be. And again, your board game collection will be how much space you have, how many games you think you should have, the games you're playing, the games that you want to hold on to because you want to play again. There's lots of reasons to have board games that aren't being played on your shelves. And like I said, I am trying to slim my collection down because I feel like I have too many that I get overwhelmed by the choices I have when I sit down to play a board game. That is all I had. So I'm going to say goodbye, and we will see you guys next time. All right. Bye.
If you like what you just saw, please support us by hitting that like button and subscribing to our channel for more great gaming content.